Hi everyone, I'm Kristine Nemec. I manage the Iowa Roadside Management Program at the Tallgrass Prairie Center at UNI. I'll be talking today about what I do to get native seed for county roadside programs. Iowa is the only state that I'm aware of that has many county roadside programs with roadside vegetation managers. They manage their roadsides using ecological integrated techniques using the principles of integrated roadside vegetation management, also known as IRVM. They hydroseed or drill native seed, hand broadcast native seed in the roadsides. They use spot spraying instead of blanket spraying to control weeds. They mow the roadsides. About half of the county programs use prescribed burns to enhance the health of the prairie vegetation that they plant, to control woody species. And brush cutting in the winter is also a big activity that roadside managers do. So they provide a lot of services to their county leadership within their county for how the roadside vegetation is managed. And the reason we have this is because of legislation that was passed in the late 1980s by the Iowa State Legislature. The legislature established the Iowa Living Roadway Trust Fund at the DOT. They established the LRTF coordinator position, Tara Van Was. The LRTF administers grants, so the counties have a means of getting funding for equipment, for conducting inventories of the roadside vegetation, to have contractors contract to survey the vegetation. They established my position at the Tallgrass Prairie Center, so I can help with outreach and providing communication, networking for the roadside managers. And since 1998, my program has gotten a grant through the Federal Highway Administration where we can provide seed. So prior to 1998, the roadside managers might get some grants from the LRTF for seed. But Kirk Henderson, who was the first program manager for my position, was able to get this large grant through the Federal Highway Administration where he could get lots of seed at a reasonable rate as opposed to each county just getting their own seed. So this is a really nice asset that we've been able to provide the county roadside programs, this large federal grant. So that's mostly what I'm going to talk about today is how I approach getting seed that I provided the counties through this grant. The numbers on this map show how many times each county has received federal seed since 1998. All but 13 counties have requested it at some point. Some just never interested in trying it. It's free to them, completely free. They just have to provide the equipment, the labor to plant it in the roadsides. They have to maintain paperwork showing where they planted it. So you can just kind of get a feel for which counties are maybe more active than others based on the number that's up there. The green means they have a roadside vegetation manager on staff. Generally, when we say a county has a roadside program, it means they have that roadside manager on staff. And the little plant in the bottom right shows that they have an IRVM plan on file with the DOT. So they have to have that plan on file to get grants. So there's a few counties that might have the plan, but they don't have a roadside manager. So they might delegate it to other people in the county, or they might be waiting till the conditions are right where they can hire a roadside manager. And those green counties are the ones with the roadside managers. So next, I'll talk about some of my priorities for what I want to include in the seed mixes that I provide to the counties through this grant. The big four, the big main warm season grasses are important: big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass, switchgrass. And by seeding rate, this is kind of an interest to people. They want to know, well, how does this compare on roadsides compared to level sites? Based on experience with the roadside programs, this is what we recommend as far as seeding rate. So the bulk of the seed mix by seeds per square foot will be the native grasses for that erosion control. On the roadsides, the counties really want the grasses there for that erosion control in those steep slopes. So usually in my seed mixes, there's at least 45 seeds per square foot of native grasses and 15 seeds per square foot of wildflowers. for, of course, like the wildlife habitat, the aesthetic benefits, we want to include sufficient wildflowers for that. I want to have some quick establishing species for that public perception. They really want to be able to see some color right away as soon as they can, so they know it's not just some weeds that are being put out there. So Canada wild rye, that's the only cool season grass I provide. Black-eyed Susan, partridge pea. Just as examples, these are some of the more quick establishing species we like to include. Early blooming species, again, for public perception. Early in the year, the more colorful species out there, we hope the less likely the landowner will mow it out. That is a problem. Sometimes the adjacent landowner will mow the planting, even though it's public property. County roadsides are public property. Sometimes if the landowner doesn't like it, they'll still mow it out. But if we can show that there's a reason, it's there, there's beauty, the public can appreciate it. And this is a challenge. There's just not as many early blooming species as there are fall blooming species. But we try to include what we can. Like golden alexanders, Ohio spiderwort, foxglove beard tongue. Those are good species we always try to include. There's showy species any time of the year. The orange, that's so unique for the butterfly milkweed, like Laura was saying. People love butterfly milkweed. It's so striking. Prairie blazing star, another really striking plant, and then compass plant. Wet species, of course, we try to include all the way from very dry to very wet species because you have that microtopography that changes from the top of the ditch down to the bottom. So swamp or rose milkweed, depending on what you prefer. Various sedges. Usually provide 3 or 4 sedges. Carex bicknellii, prairie sedge, is one of them that we often include. Fox sedge. Carex molesta is another one we include. And then prairie cordgrass. So prairie cordgrass is very expensive, but it is such a nice addition for the wet areas. So if I can afford it, I certainly try to include prairie cordgrass. Legumes, just like any diverse seed mix, prairie seed mix should include some legumes for the nitrogen fixing capabilities. Canada milkvetch, purple prairie clover, round-headed bush clover as examples. And some of these I've already shown, but nectar plants, this has become huge since around 2015. There's a lot of federal interest in getting more pollinators on the landscape, and in turn, a lot of nectar plants. The public conservationists are very interested in this, so I try to include nectar plants that bloom all across the season, plants that are really popular with pollinators. So those are the basics, the main ones I really try to prioritize. Every 2 or 3 years, I'll check in with Justin or Laura, show them the seed mix. Is there anything you recommend? That's how the prairie cordgrass got in there, because Justin thought that's probably something really good to include. I put Canada anemone in for bid sometimes, but I don't see that. Sometimes I'm not able to get it. So I just like to get their input on what's becoming more available, what would be good to try out. A lot of these species I inherited. The previous program managers had come up with something that worked really well based on the roadside managers, but I'm always open to tweaking them, open to adjusting what goes in these seed mixes. Something new I've tried, since I came on board in 2015, the Tallgrass Prairie Center developed a seed calculator. So I plugged in the species into that, and that's kind of helped me determine roughly how many seeds of each species to include. So I try to follow the guidelines of our native seed calculator. And so I have my seed mix, I know what I want. I've gotten permission from the Federal Highways Administration to put it out for bid. So here's a couple of features from the bid that people might be interested in. So I have a preference for regional ecotype or local ecotype seed. This has been true all throughout my career. I started out, my first position was at the Corps of Engineers. I did seeding specs for prairie projects, and I really advocated for this. I was in meetings sometimes and people were like, no, cultivars are fine. I've always, all along, advocated for local ecotype seed. It's just adapted. You have less chance of weedy species from other states coming in. So I was really excited to work here and get to learn about this even more with the Iowa Ecotype program. So this is something I've always been interested in. So the highest preference is for yellow tag Iowa Ecotype seed. The next highest preference is just Iowa yellow tag. And then the third highest preference is yellow tag from other states. Like Minnesota, sometimes we'll get yellow tag from there, or sometimes Missouri. The fourth preference, uncertified seed, has 0 preference. And then we don't want any cultivated varieties, no varieties of grasses and forbs treated with neonicotinoid insecticides. So what this looks like, for example, let's say one species is the Iowa Ecotype project and is $2.75 a pound. And then here's a yellow tag seed from out of state and is $2.13 a pound. So, wow, it looks cheaper, right? That's great. But then I apply my formula. So I tack on 15% to that yellow tag from out of state because it's out of state. And then I add 15% because it's not the Ecotype project. So you add 30% to that cost and it comes out to be $2.77. So the Iowa Ecotype project seed actually is cheaper once I add kind of those penalties, just because it doesn't meet my preference. So as a result of this, around 85 to 90% of the seed I end up buying is Iowa Ecotype or Iowa yellow tag. And UNI does give me some flexibility. If the cheapest seed, even after all of this, is from Washington State, for example, they said you don't have to accept that if it doesn't make biological sense to you. So that's nice. I'm not locked into something that doesn't make any biological sense, even if it's the cheapest. So contractors can be flexible, and it's worked out okay. The last 4 or 5 years or so, we have requested that the seed be tested at one of these 7 university labs. Just in the sake of fairness, there's some private labs we have some questions about. So just in the sake of fairness, we said, okay, let's just go with university labs. So that's what we're using now. I know the last meeting, we had some discussion about this. This is still something that's, I know there's some questions about which the labs are better to use versus others, but this is how it is now. We require that the seed be tested at one of these 7 labs. I offer 2 kinds of seed mixes. One's a clean out mix, which isn't worth quite as much. It's still fairly diverse. And then the diversity mix has a lot more species. So the clean out mix is more intended for areas that might have to be disturbed or cleaned out again. For example, ditches or roadsides by farmland with a lot of runoff. So if there's that risk that it might have to be planted again, and it might not always be that situation, but the thinking is if there's a risk that the site might have to be disturbed again, we won't spend quite as much money. So every April, May, or June, we clear out our equipment from the shed behind the Tallgrass Prairie Center. Thanks to the help of Justin and Laura, they helped get that out of there temporarily for a week or so. We assemble a crew of students or AmeriCorps members who come in, and they take all these boxes of the wildflower seed, the sedges, assemble it in garbage bags. So the garbage bags are what all the wildflower and sedge species are in. We have big pallets of grasses. And then we have a couple of days where the counties that requested it come and drive to the shed, pick it up. And it's just nice to see everyone come out and get their seed. On average, we give out around 1,000 to 1,300 acres of seed for county roadsides every year. So it's one of the larger, consistently larger restoration projects in the state every year, at least on public land. And like I mentioned before, the counties have to let us know where they planted the seed. They fill out a report every 6 months. They provide a map. Most of the time, they provide a paper map. They can also go online if they have that GIS capability and enter where they planted online. They have two growing seasons, or about a year and a half to plant it. So the seed they pick up this year has to be planted by the end of next year. So some challenges to this whole process. Every year there's just uncertainty of when I'll get the authorization from the Federal Highway Administration. It just varies. It can be as early February, it can be late March. And usually the seed distribution is 6 to 8 weeks after I get that authorization, because there's the bid process, and then there's approvals I have to go through at the university level, then waiting for the testing results to come back. So the seed pickup, or the seed distribution, can be anywhere from April to June, just depending on when we get that authorization. And ideally, it's in April, because then they can plant it within the spring during that growing season. And also there's less risk that some of the species won't be available. And usually most of the species are, but sometimes some of the wildflower species won't be available if we don't go out for bid until like April or May. The seed prices, this is just kind of the nature of the seed market. There was that intense demand in 2017 for the pollinator mixes and CRP, which really drove up the seed prices. And my seed mix, 2017, 2018 or so, I was only able to provide around 7 or 8 wildflower seeds per square foot. Because another challenge that I don't think I mentioned up here is that I have to apply for the grant a year and a half before I receive it. So last fall, I applied for the seed I'll provide in 2023. So at that time, a year and a half before I buy it, I have to estimate how much I'll need. So that's a big challenge. So I don't know what the seed market's going to be in a year and a half. I just make my best guess about what it has been doing. So that's why 2017, 2018, I wasn't prepared, because I didn't anticipate this huge demand. So that's why I didn't provide nearly as much wildflowers as I would like. But then I rewrote my grant. I really tried to justify this is why we need more money, because the wildflower prices go up, and we really want at least 15 seeds per square foot for these wildflowers. Because of the ecological benefit, the aesthetic benefit, the public buy-in, we need more wildflowers. And I was able to get, normally the seed grant is around $300,000 to $320,000, and I got more up to $460,000, $470,000 worth of seed 2019. So we're able to get caught up. So the last few years I felt really good. We can provide these wildflowers that we really want. And the prices are stabilizing now. So I've been able to knock down the cost to around $420,000 worth of seed. I just try to, I'm reasonable, I don't want to get too much, I just try to match the market conditions. That's what I try to do, adapt to market conditions. Another challenge, one of the big challenges in restoration in general, it'd be nice to have more resources to monitor how the plantings are doing. I think that's true of all of us, whether at the county level or my level. We'd love to see how they're doing, but you just do what you can with the resources you have. So I use summer AmeriCorps members to go out and do kind of like a windshield survey, and I get a feel for what dominant species are establishing, the wildflowers that are really easy to ID. So that's something. But in an ideal world, we could rotate the counties and get some more detailed data, but I don't have the funding to do that. So I just do what I can to get a snapshot view. Okay, how are the plantings doing? So we do maybe a couple of counties each year, 20 sites, random sites or so, and just see what's establishing. And then like I said, the differing opinions on the seed testing labs to use. What's the quality like? So I'm really glad we had that talk earlier. It's just the more information we can get on the accuracy of these seed testing labs, I think the better off we'll all be. So in summary, that's my basic approach to applying for the seed, providing the seed. I'm always open to new ideas of species to include. It's just fun to provide some new species when we can, besides the basics, or staples, especially if I can afford it. All right, with that, I guess I can do my last slide here. That's my contact information. I didn't put our YouTube channel on there. I should have. That's our latest social media account. We do have a YouTube channel. If you just search for Iowa Roadside Management. We have a few videos up there. And I can relate to what Shauna was saying. I think videos are really important for showcasing what we're doing. Just in this day and age, the more visual kind of media you can put out there, the better for the public. So we do have a video, about a 3-minute video of the Jones County Roadside Manager, Wes Gibbs, talking about what he does. What does he do as a roadside manager? We have another 3-ish minute video or so of his supervisor, the engineer. The Jones County engineer, Derek Sneed, really approves of the roadside program. So it's more from his perspective. How does the engineer benefit from having a roadside program? So as I get funding or availability with help, I think those can be great testimonials. Just a short video, this is what we do, this is why we like it. So that's part of my role, is to elevate the voice of the counties, the county folks who appreciate this program. I think people are just like to listen to their peers. So I really value that if I can get videos or written testimonials of county officials or the county roadside managers, what they're doing. I think that's, to me, that's a good sense of marketing. With that, now I can accept any questions.
When we were talking about seed species, have we ever brought up the subject of kind of hitting some of the more threatened and endangered species at all, like the prairie fringed orchid or anything like that? And I know that kind of involves some DNR people too, probably, or it may have sparked their interest a little bit. But I know we talk about areas where we have these unicorns in the right of way. The public doesn't know they're there. So if they mow them off and I don't know about it, then they're gone. But are we doing anything to try to preserve that seed bank? And maybe Laura has a little insight on it too. I don't know. But it's just something that kind of was triggered by the species that you're selecting for the mixes and stuff. And then it got me thinking about, well, what are some other species we should be hitting?
As far as including in the seed mix, as far as remnants, I know that some of the counties do have ways to protect the remnants. They'll communicate with people, and they'll have maps or something to identify where the remnants are, especially if they've had an inventory done. A contractor come out and do a roadside inventory. They know where those remnants are. But of course, they try not to publicize them too much. Some of the counties have quite a bit of plant diversity. So some of them do have those populations out there in the roadside.
I was kind of thinking about it with like the sedge availability in the seed market. And then if there was other stuff we needed to start bringing back in or something like that, or we had them in the seed bank by chance, is there the chance that we could kind of not necessarily start farms of this stuff to try to get them off the list, but do something?
I think maybe I'll weigh in there a little bit, and that's that with the plant materials program, we've worked kind of the basic bottom line for us is to work with species that are kind of the persisters in the environment, that are most likely to be able to establish and maintain populations within our roadsides, which are a pretty disturbed system. So we have not purposely targeted threatened and endangered species for propagation for native seed growers. So that would be a whole new subject of discussion if we were to go that route. But like the species that I'm currently interested in collecting are things that are widespread. They're common in remnant prairies of different types, and that's what we focused on. But it's an interesting topic, and especially the preservation of those remnants that are on roadsides is extremely important. And we even see just little tiny relic populations of things that, I was out collecting the parasol whitetop last year, and I had just been to a site that was extremely degraded with reed canary grass, was feeling pretty sad, driving along to my next site. Google Maps routed me kind of the wrong way, and I ended up down a gravel road in Fayette County and had to pull off to the side of the road and back up because there was one of the biggest populations of that parasol whitetop that I'd ever seen growing next to a cornfield, along with gentians and the nice friendly the fringe, not the purple loosestrife, but the little native prairie one, the Lithrum elatum. And so there are these pockets and these treasures. It would be, for me, I'd love to have a universal place to find that information, but yeah, I'm learning it as we go. I'm sorry, I'm taking up time. Are there other questions for Kristine?
So I'm from Wisconsin, and this program is, I've always been interested in it, and I realize it's taken a generation to really take hold. But what compels roadside managers to be a part of the program? And I see a certain percentage of counties are not in the program. Does it take a dedicated road manager? Because I would imagine most county road managers would rather drop the mower and go and not have to futz with the native plantings.
Well, usually it's the county officials, like the board of supervisors, the engineer, the conservation board director. They're the ones who decide whether they want to have a roadside manager or not. Once they have a roadside manager in place, we consider that, okay, they have a program. They have someone who's managing ecologically. But I would say the board of supervisors are really key, since they kind of determine the budget. And then if the engineer or conservation board director can influence them to see the value, that's really important. So it just depends on the local politics, the priorities, the funding mechanisms, all of that goes into play. And some counties see the value, but they don't have the political will, I guess, to do it at this time. So sometimes it'll be a few years later when the political makeup changes, and then they come back to me and say, hey, we'd like to get involved.
Okay, so potentially interested people within the county government, but also responding to public demand if it's there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, there's been a few counties that there's been key individuals who've gone into the board of supervisors and they've gotten a coalition. So that's kind of the neat thing about county government, is that people can have quite a lot of influence if they're really motivated and they are willing to invest the time and try to influence the board of supervisors. So we have had a few counties since I've started where it's just the key individuals who are able to get it. And sometimes it originates within the county government itself. So it just depends on who's the motivator to get it going.
Not as much a question, but to kind of build off of that, I feel like, and I don't remember where I saw this, but maybe it was the Jones County or Johnson County, Story County, one of these videos that was on Instagram. It was like a roadside manager talking about making the transition to doing the IRVM stuff, and like that they had saved X amount of money from mowing and stuff like that. Is that something that you guys talk about at your meetings? And that would be, you know, in terms of, well, what would motivate a rural county to do something like this? You can save $30,000 a year in herbicide or mowing or whatever, you know. It's like, I think that's something that you could emphasize, and that would be a big reason to encourage people to keep doing this.
Yes, we definitely like to have more cost-benefit information. It depends on, I guess, who's keeping track of that. I mean, it's so individual depending on the county and what they're controlling and such. But I belong to the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group, and they're partnering with Burns and McDonnell consulting firm to do a feasibility study on cost-benefit information. So they gathered some of that information last October. We just had our winter roadside manager weekend meeting last week. And some of the roadside managers have submitted cost-benefit data to that study. I imagine a lot of DOTs have too. So this cost-benefit study that the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group is doing with the Burns and McDonnell, I think is really interesting. So at least they're getting a framework for how to collect this data and how they're organizing it. And I guess we'll see how much county data they were able to collect, or if that's something we can apply and survey even more of the counties in Iowa. But at least it sounds like we're getting some data we might be able to use. And I think the key is getting a contractor if we want to go into this in a lot of depth to get cost-benefit information.
Kristine, I wondered if you might share a little bit about your insights from your survey that looked at, you know, motivations of the roadside managers, but also the supervisors and the so forth, on the importance of pollinators as a motivating factor versus other motivating factors for doing this, because the public perception is that pollinators, you know, rah, 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 but what are the decision makers actually really valuing?
So in 2017, I got a grant from the LRTF to survey the chairs of the County Board of Supervisors and the County Conservation Board directors, those two groups, just to see how they perceive IRVM, how they perceive roadside programs. So it's a wealth of information, but one question we asked them was, what are the key factors, or what are the most important factors when you decide how roadside vegetation should be managed? There's around 9 factors. I think number 1 was safety, 2 was erosion control. I think cost savings is one of the top 3 or 4. But out of all the factors we gave them, so it was multiple choice, and they weighted how important each factor was, pollinators and wildlife was at the very bottom. So that's something to keep in mind when I go approach counties. I think it's important to meet them where they're at, which was mentioned earlier. You need to meet people where they're at. So even though we have these nectar plants, that's not the focus. I mean, that's going to be a benefit anyway. We know that's going to be a benefit. So I don't emphasize that. I talk more about the erosion control, the leadership the roadside manager can provide. I think the engineers can appreciate that. Because if a county doesn't have a roadside manager, well then the engineer is the go-to person for the public. So I try to emphasize more things that are going to mean something to the county. That safety. I think people don't realize how the native grasses can help with snow glare, for example. So those are the things I try to talk about, or encourage others to talk about: safety, erosion control, because that's what's important to them. And they know the flowers are there for the public too. People like flowers. They don't have to know all the details. Well, this benefits this kind of bee, and that's just, we're going to get that anyway, so why spend a lot of time talking about that?